Willow Creek was the kind of place you'd see in a magazine spread about perfect suburban life. Neat rows of houses baked under the summer sun, their lawns so green they looked painted, the air heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine and a faint whiff of pool chlorine. Every mailbox was identical, every hedge trimmed to HOA-approved perfection. This wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a fortress of rules, built on the dreams of folks chasing quiet streets and good schools, held together by a covenant thicker than a phone book. And the woman who ruled it all, the one who made sure every blade of grass obeyed, that was Margaret Voss. Margaret was in her mid-50s, her hair sprayed into a helmet that laughed in the face of humidity, her wardrobe a parade of beige and taupe, as if she'd memorized the HOA's approved color palette. She didn't walk the curved VY-ing streets of Willow Creek. She patrolled them, her posture screaming she was ready to pounce on any infraction. The HOA bylaws were her gospel, and she wielded them with the zeal of a preacher. Neighbors whispered about her behind closed doors, calling her the warden when they were feeling kind, that Karen when they weren't. She'd earned it, with her knack for spotting a trash can left out an hour too long or a kid's bike leaning against a garage. Margaret didn't just enforce rules. She lived for it. Property values were her mantra, community standards her weapon. An unapproved wind chime? A war crime. A mailbox with a dent? A personal attack. Life in Willow Creek was a balancing act. You learned to mow your lawn on schedule, hide your kids' toys, and submit blueprints for a new porch light. The goal was simple: stay off Margaret's radar. But when the Harper family moved in, that radar started beeping. James Harper was an electrical engineer, a quiet guy whose calm hid a high-stakes job as chairman of the National Electrical Safety Board. His wife, Laura, was a therapist, all warmth and empathy, the kind of person who'd listen to your problems over coffee. Their daughter, Ellie, was 17, a bright, artistic kid with a cochlear implant from a childhood illness that left her deaf. She gated the world with lip reading, sign language, and that little VYC behind her ear, turning sound into something her brain could understand. It was her bridge to music, to conversations, to the hum of life. The Harpers came to Willow Creek for the same reasons as everyone else: good schools, safe streets, but they didn't know the minefield they'd stepped into. Margaret noticed Ellie right away. The girl's quiet signing with her mom, the way she'd tuck her hair back and flash that implant. It all seemed to rub Margaret wrong, like a smudge on her perfect canvas. Trouble started small, as it always did with Margaret. A letter in the Harper's mailbox cited some obscure rule about recycling boxes lingering too long. Then came a face-to-face gripe. Margaret claimed she could feel Ellie's music VY bratting through her walls. James, ever the engineer, called it nonsense. Ellie's music went through earbuds to her implant, barely audible to anyone else. The physics didn't add up, but Margaret wasn't about physics. She was about control. Then there was the lawn. Ellie, like any teenager cutting corners, sometimes walked across the edge of the communal green on her way home from the bus. It'd save her maybe 20 feet, nothing anyone else would notice. But to Margaret, that patch of grass was sacred, part of a garden bed she tended with creepy devotion. One scorching afternoon, she ambushed Ellie, planting herself in the girl's path. "This is HOA property," she snapped, jabbing a finger at the lawn. "It takes water and care. Stay off it. Use the walkway." Ellie, startled, touched her implant, trying to catch the rapid-fire words. She signed an apology to Laura later, who passed it on to Margaret, hoping to keep the peace. But Margaret didn't want peace. She wanted obedience. From then on, Margaret watched Ellie like a hawk, clocking the bus schedule, noting every time the girl paused near that lawn, sketchbook in hand, to draw a flower or catch the light. It wasn't just about the grass anymore. Margaret had a bigger obsession: water. Willow Creek's irrigation was a point of pride, tightly controlled to keep the lawns lush in the brutal heat. At HOA meetings, she'd rant about wasteful sprinklers, hinting at deterrence for anyone, especially kids, who dared tread on wet grass. And Margaret wasn't just talk. She fancied herself a handywoman, always tinkering with plumbing or wiring, bragging about fixing things others left to pros. Neighbors had seen her poking around the sprinkler controls near that garden bed, screwdriver in hand, muttering about efficiency. No one thought much of it. Why would they? It was just Margaret being Margaret. But something darker was brewing. Margaret's resentment of Ellie, her fixation on rules, and her overconfidence in her DIY skills twisted into a plan so vicious it was hard to believe it came from the same woman who fussed over mailbox heights. That humid afternoon, when the air felt like a storm was holding its breath, Ellie stepped off the bus, earbuds in, music easing the day's stress. The communal lawn glistened, wet from an odd, unscheduled sprinkler run. Drawn to the cool grass, Ellie veered off the path, settling near the garden bed to sketch some VY Brant petunias. Across the street, behind her curtains, Margaret watched, her pulse quickening. This was it, the moment to teach that girl a lesson. Margaret's hand closed around a homemade remote trigger on her windowsill. She'd rigged the sprinkler near Ellie to do more than spray water. With a click, she pressed the button. The sprinkler jolted to life, but it wasn't just water that burst out. A blue arc of electricity snapped between the metal sprinkler head and the soaked ground, the air crackling with raw energy. For Ellie, the world turned to chaos. Her implant didn't just translate sound, it screamed, a digital wail of electrical noise stabbing her brain. Pain seared through her, her body convulsing as the jolt hit, throwing her back onto the grass. Then nothing. Silence, black and total, as her implant sparked, smoked, and died. James heard Ellie's choked cry from inside the house. His heart stopped as he saw her through the window, twitching on the lawn, water spraying wildly. "Ellie!" he roared, sprinting outside, Laura right behind him, her face pale with terror. Years of training kicked in, show VYing panic aside. The wet ground, the scorched sprinkler head, the smell of ozonite screamed electrocution. "Laura, stay back," he shouted. "Don't touch her. It's live." He raced to the garage, grabbing heavy rubber gloves and an insulated pole, tools he kept for his dangerous work. With precise, desperate moves, he hooked the pole under Ellie and dragged her to dry ground. She was limp, her breathing shallow, her lips blue. The implant was charred, useless. Sirens wailed as an ambulance sped her away, Laura clutching her hand, tears streaming. James stayed behind, staring at the cordoned-off lawn, now a crime scene lit by flashing police lights. His fear for Ellie burned, but so did a cold, furious certainty. This wasn't an accident. He told the cops as much, his voice tight. Deliberate modification. High voltage. Lethal. His title chairman of the NES carried weight, and he used it, calling Frank Delaney, the board's top investigator. "Frank, it's James. My daughter's been electrocuted. Someone rigged the sprinklers. It's intentional." Frank didn't hesitate. "I'm sending a team." Hang Dai. 90 minutes later, Frank and his forensic crew arrived, their van a mobile lab. They worked under floodlights, finding high voltage in the sprinkler heads, even with the system off. Digging carefully, they uncovered indoor wiring, poorly spliced, buried where it shouldn't be, leading to a jury-rigged 240-volt circuit in the HOA's utility shed. A bypassed breaker ensured it wouldn't trip. Footprints in the mudwoman's shoes, sensible, familiar, pointed to Margaret's daily patrols. James gut twisted. He knew those shoes. A search warrant brought police to Margaret's door. She opened it, indignant, but her face fell when Detective Larson laid out the EVY Denke. Lethal voltage, illegal wiring, her footprints. In her garage, they found matching wire and tools. In her study, a diagram sketched out the deadly setup, and her computer showed searches for electric shock deterrence and remote wiring. The remote trigger sat on a table, undeniable. Margaret crumpled, her defiance gone. "It was just to scare her," she stammered, but the cuffs clicked anyway. Aggravated assault, child endangerment, reckless endangerment. She was done. The trial was a slaughter. Margaret's lawyer tried to spin it as a DIY mistake, but James testified, explaining in plain terms why 240 volts in wet ground was a death trap. Frank laid out the forensic proof: deliberate, reckless, lethal. Ellie's injuries: burns, heart damage, a destroyed implant sealed it. Neighbors, finally free to speak, painted Margaret as a tyrant fixated on Ellie. She took a plea, admitting to felonies, and got 15 years, with 12 before parole. The Harpers sued, and Margaret's house, her SAVY, everything, was sold to fund Ellie's care. Her perfect Willow Creek life was ashes. The HOA imploded. The board quit, and a new one hired pros to manage the place, locking down utility access. Willow Creek started to breathe again, less prison, more neighborhood. Ellie fought hard to recover. Surgery replaced her implant, but the trauma lingered, eased only by therapy and her parents' love. She graduated, studied art therapy, and spoke out anonymously about safety and disability. James poured his pain into the NESB, launching a PSA campaign that millions saw. Unsafe wiring can kill. Hire pros. Check your circuits. It was Margaret's unintended legacy. The Harper stayed in Willow Creek, refusing to let one woman's malice win. Ellie's art bloomed. James's work saved lives, and the neighborhood softened, kids playing without fear of sprinkler heads. Margaret, in her cell, was forgotten, her quest for control a cautionary tale. Ellie's silence had been shattered, replaced by a voice that echoed far beyond Willow Creek.